Welcome in to the Just Basketball Show. I'm Chris Manning. That over there is Brendon Kleen. We're coming to you for Wednesday, May 17th. If you haven't already, please subscribe or follow us on your podcast platform of choice. Rate and subscribe everywhere you can. Give us those 5 stars only. Please hit subscribe and hit the notification bell on YouTube if you have not already. As always, we have a jam-packed show today. We delayed recording for a day or two because we had to talk about the lottery, and we had to talk about Game 1 of the Western Conference Finals, which the Nuggets won. Got a little bit hairy late, got a little bit dicey late for them, but they hold on. But that felt very competitive. Some really smart adjustments by the Lakers, I think, to bring that game closer, and I'm curious to see where that series goes. But Brendon, let's start with the NBA Draft Lottery because we know where Victor Wembanyama is going to start his career, and in the vein
what if
of
they just
Tony
don't
Parker,
take Vic, though? Have we talked about that possibility?
There's a 0% chance of that happening. Did you see Peter Holt screaming on ESPN?
Could be a big scoop guy. We don't know until we know. No, I think you're
he's like
obviously right.
He's like I just love Amoni Bates that much. So he's like got all of his Amoni Bates stock. He's like, hear me out, T-Rex arms. So Wemby in the vein of his countryman Tony Parker. Mm-hmm. In the
Boris
vein
Diaw.
of Boris Diaw. In the vein of Tim Duncan and David Robinson in terms of generational big men, is going to the San Antonio Spurs. You are shaking your head. What is your reaction to Wemby to San Antonio?
So Greg Popovich, notoriously a big wine guy, right? Like he has these dinners. It's legendary stuff around the league with how many different coaches and players have crossed through San Antonio at this point. What kind of wine do you think Pop ordered at the dinner where Adam Silver told him he was getting Vic? Like 2 weeks ago. What kind of, was it a Merlot? Was it like a cab? Was it maybe a nice sangria iced?
Jake Stevens, our producer, I need you to play like some Hitchcockian, like spooky conspiracy theory. Like we need some of that vibes here from Brendon.
Look, I don't actually hate the Spurs that much. I think we did a show a while back where I actually said that the Spurs deserved him. I think that they have the most stable organization. If you judge from his answers and even like the instinctive response that he was caught on video with, Chris, whether it's the connections, it is kind of funny. He chose not to play for Tony Parker's French league team this year because he wasn't going to get playing time, and now he's going to the Spurs anyway. So the conspiracy people kind of receded after he parted ways with Tony Parker, and yet Adam Silver set him up anyway. But joking aside, I don't actually hate the Spurs that much. Like Suns fans sometimes in the history of that rivalry might, there's a lot of moments I'm kind of overdoing it for show, but it is insane that David Robinson, Tim Duncan, and Victor Wembanyama would all end up on the same franchise. Like it's either poetic and beautiful or the absolute worst thing, depending on what team you root for, I guess. But I think for his career, which I'm rooting for more so than any of that nonsense, it's going to be a really good landing place for him. I think that the infrastructure is there. The stability is there. They actually have a sneaky good supporting cast. And so of all the options, maybe there would have been some more chaotic ones, maybe some more fun ones, maybe some more star-studded Portland, for instance. But look, like Vic there, I think that's going to be an awesome spot, and they could be competitive pretty quickly.
Matthew Tynan, who does a really good job writing about the Spurs, has for a long time. You can get his Substack. Now, I used to work at The Athletic. Pointed out that they will be using one first-round pick to pick Wembanyama. So, Brendon, the Spurs have 12 more over the next 5 years and like a bajillion of second-round picks to boot. They have Keldon Johnson. They have Pop. They have a coaching staff and organization that has done this before. We'll see what they think about Brendon and what these other guys that they have.
Mm-hmm. Vassell,
big Vassell. Like Vassell plus Keldon Johnson plus Wemby is like a very modern 2-3 or 3-4-5. Like you have a lot of great stuff there. Mm-hmm. You need to figure out the guard stuff. I know they use a ton of draft picks on guards. Obviously, those haven't worked out for various reasons fully, but they figure out the guard spot. They maybe bring in a veteran or two to kind of like be like an adult for some of that stuff. And like this team is on the move, and they will have the assets to make trades and find the right guys that they want.
Yeah,
Like,
you mentioned guard and you
all
mentioned
this
trades.
stuff.
That's where I wanted to go. Do you think this puts the Spurs in play for someone like Lillard or Chris Paul or somebody like that? Maybe more so. We don't like the Spurs don't make trades. It's hard to imagine that, but they would have to look at that, right? You can't just play Trey Jones again. I mean, you got to kind of put your chips in the table a little bit here.
I don't think Dame.
Okay.
But I think Chris Paul. I could see it. I could see veteran hand. You know, is that what Chris Paul wants? That's a whole other conversation. Like, what does he want?
Pop has loved him forever, right? Those guys. There's always been that kind of flirtation.
Well, and if you told me that you could get Chris Paul even at this age, and he doesn't play back, he won't play back-to-backs for you. You don't need to worry about if he's going to make it to May. Like, that's not a concern for you. If you tell me you got that guy who, let's think about what he was in OKC.
Yep.
And he comes in, he buys into the young guys, makes Shea better, helps Dennis Schroeder have a great year, makes that organization and that culture better. He went in and did that. You're telling me that that's a guy you could pair with a rookie, Victor Wembanyama, and have coach for Pop? Like, that would be, I think, a success. I think there's other routes you could go as well. But, like, I would, if you could, you know, the Suns don't have a lot of picks to trade, but you get a second-round pick and send them stuff, and, like, I'd be like, yeah, great. Like, I'll take Chris Paul. That would be great for you, for even at the number, and you have the money to spend anyway. This Brendon to me, like, this is the best landing spot for him, and this is the one that I like of the two that I was hoping for. I either wanted Portland or I wanted this. This is the one where it's like I think he's going to get to go to an organization that knows what it's doing, that has done this before, that has some pieces there already. Like like it's going to take some time still. This team will not be a title contender from day one. That's not how this works. But what seems to be the case here is like infrastructure to be there. Now, Pop's succession plan, what the coaching situation looks like in a year, in 2 years, what that looks like is like an open question.
With
but
his
like,
coaching tree, though, it's like, aren't there a dozen coaches around the league who would go to San Antonio in a heartbeat, especially now? Whether it's Ime Udoka or Monty Williams or Quinn Snyder or Becky Hammond, James Borrego. There's all these pretty established coaches. I know those aren't all amazing names, but like
Brett Brown is back on that staff. Has been back on that staff. I kind of thought like there's a lot of talk for a while that Snyder was going to wait and take the job, and maybe he just got impatient. Maybe the Hawks offered him like too much money, too much power, but. Like
there's been a long line of they're gonna get the Pop job people. There's been a lot of memes going around of how old Pop will be now after he retires, considering we thought he was done a few years ago and now he got this guy. But what are your expectations? I agree they're not gonna be competing for a championship next season. The rest of the rosters not close enough, even if you thought Vic was going to be the best possible thing. By the way, I'm going Vic, not Wemby. I feel like a child saying the word Wemby on a professional podcast, so I'll just make that announcement now to you and whoever's listening. I'm going to go Vic.
Breaking news! Hit it, Jake. We need the siren.
Yeah, everybody knows now where my allegiances are on the nickname. But what are your expectations for him, for them and for him? Because I mean, if I told you he was 20-10 next season with 2 blocks, is that like unfair to him to place on him, or do you think that's like a good baseline? What do you even think he's going to do? Because that should affect how they view this offseason of how far they try to go to set him up for year one.
Yeah, so like I think he is being set up to succeed here. Like this is a win for him. I think that much is very clear. I think it's like an 18 in like could you see like the physicality part I think is like the real thing that makes it hard to answer. Like is he
and health. Yeah.
Right. And like just like day one, like does he come in and it's like hey, like you know, even someone like let's say Jakob Poeltl or Ivica Zubac, Mitchell Robinson. These guys who are like a little bit above average centers, which is like a very good place to like very good competent NBA centers. They will kick the crap out of you if you're Victor Wembanyama playing the 5. So like, do they go get a 5 to play with him? Is kind of like another question for me. Like, do they play him as a 4 to start and let him kind of roam and not have to absorb some of that rim protection stuff kind of more directly? But I think the numbers and some of the impact stuff is going to be there right away. I think it's very clear, just like how he plays and what we've seen from him, that some of that is just going to translate right away. I don't think it's going to drive like high-end winning. Like I would still be surprised if this team's like in the play-in hunt next year. Like the West is just very good, and like they're going to have to. They would really have to overhaul the roster to me to really do that. Like this roster just isn't going to be competitive enough and deep enough to do that. But like if he's generational and he drive, like it's just hard to do that. Like LeBron in year one of his career 20 years ago when the NBA was not nearly as talented, had a hard time. Like didn't make the playoffs in his first year. It's just really hard to drive winning like that as a rookie. It's just history tells us that.
Yeah, and I think, too, part of the stability that San Antonio has means that they're in a situation where there's no real reason to rush this along. You know, like it's not Tillman Fertitta in Houston getting a little tipsy and telling a local newscast that all their hopes and dreams as a franchise are resting on getting this dude, right? It's the Spurs. They've won 5 championships in the past 20 years. They have legends in the rafters and a whole bunch of history, and they're not a big market, and there's not all these other things pulling them in a bunch of different directions. They're owned by a family that runs Caterpillar. Like this is not, a pressure cooker environment in the same way that some of these other situations might have been, and so you don't have to necessarily push everything in. You mentioned that Cavaliers team, I mean, that was an old team, right? Like aside from Varejao, most of the guys contributing on that LeBron's rookie year team were Ilgauskas, who was already 29. Drew Gooden was young too. But guys like Jeff McGinnis and Ira Newble and people that, most fans don't even remember.
Here's some of the guys on that roster in their years of experience. You had LeBron and Jason Capona. Remember Jason Capona?
You do. Probably more than me.
Do. Yeah, played for the Raptors as well. Carlos Boozer was on that team. This is right before he, as the legend has it, lied to a blind man and went to the Utah Jazz, although he has since refuted that. Kevin Ollie, who may be an NBA head coach here in the near future, was a 6-year veteran on this team. Darius Miles was in year 3. Chris Mim was in year 3. Jeff McGinnis was on that team. Mateen Cleaves was in year 3 in that team. You had Ricky Davis in year 5, Deshaun Diop was in year 2, and DeJuan Wagner was in year 1. So there were some older guys, but it wasn't like a super old team.
I had Gooden because I was looking at year 2. So thank you for that.
The year 2 team was like we need Eric Snow to be an adult and Robert Tractor Trailer rest in power. They got older in year 1 for year 2 because it was we should get some adults who can play basketball with this guy who's the greatest thing we've ever had in our franchise's history.
But even then, I mean, it was not in the throes of a multi-year rebuild in the same way San Antonio is. So it'll be interesting to see again how much do they accelerate. We didn't even mention Jeremy Sohan, who I think is another really interesting young player.
It's a great call.
Who they can build with. They have that versatility, wing-heavy type of roster where it's nice. It's set up nicely for Wembanyama, I think. As far as him, my kind of running thing in my head has been Joel Embiid. The year when he finally played. And obviously Vic isn't coming off of injuries in the same way that Embiid already had suffered injuries, but I think that there's going to be a level of carefulness that happens just because you don't want there to be an injury with a guy that big. Embiid obviously got shut down by the end of that season, but he played 31 games. The most important part of that to me, though, is he only played 25 minutes per game. I think that I kind of feel like they might go that route with him, with games every other night and 82 of them instead of whatever the French league is, which I would imagine it is significantly fewer. And the physicality, like you mentioned, it's a lot different, with a lower level league like that versus, Steven Adams smashing into you. But still Embiid put up 20 and 8. So with 3 blocks. So I think, I don't know. You said that you don't think the Spurs would be in the play-in hunt. I think they could.
It's just
if
the West.
Young guys come along. Vassell was a legitimate. I know it was a bad team, so I don't really mean all-star caliber. He really should have made the all-star team. But numbers-wise, he was up there with anyone. He just wasn't healthy. But if you get steps forward plus that type of performance from Wemby,
but they won 22 games last year.
Yeah.
The 10th seeded team in the West won 40 games.
Yeah.
That's an 18. It's an 18 win jump to get in the 10 seed, and that's with Dallas at 11. You look at the teams in the West. There will be some change, right? There's change every NBA summer that we don't see coming. But you look through that top 10 in the West. You don't see a lot of stuff where I'm like, I'm sure that team is going to be worse next year, or they're going to fall off. Like maybe something changes, like maybe the Clippers like do blow it up this summer, and like that they become a tanking team, and that opens up a spot and some wins. But like
Jazz
it's going to be
could get worse on purpose again. Yeah,
sure.
But you're right.
But like
no, I'm probably overestimating that potential. I mean,
it's just it will be like if they pull that off, and it's because of Wemby, like give him rookie of the year, like he's gonna be like a minus like bajillion favorite for rookie.
I saw Matt Moore at the Action Network did an article where he talked to odds makers about where their lines are win-loss totals now versus whoever gets Vic, and it was as much as a 5.5 win swing that they were going to be counting. So not quite 18, but I mean, I am expecting the young guys that they already have to be better, plus a move like a Chris Paul type of thing, maybe even multiple moves like that. Not to go all in or waste your cap space, but I just think there's a certain level of commitment and insulation and support you have to have on the court for a guy like that. Even if you're San Antonio and all the off-court stuff is in a really stable spot, like you don't want to have him playing on a terrible team if he's ready to already do more than that. So it's going to be fascinating with the Spurs. Like part of what's funny about it is, aside from the year they got Aldridge and the trade when they finally traded Kawhi, they just had great players forever, so they weren't really in the mix to be making moves, but now they might be a player for all that stuff.
Yeah, 100%. So let's move on to a couple other small things in lottery, Brendon. I think the Hornets at 2 is really interesting because they have LaMelo. Does that kind of automatically make them a Miller team? Does like that's been a thing where, you know, people like Rafael Barlow and Gavoni and others have kind of reported and discussed how there are teams that have Miller over Scoot.
Yeah.
I kind of wonder if having LaMelo means like they just become a Brandon Miller team kind of head on here as we start this process.
Yeah, so Gavoni and Kevin O'Connor both had Miller at 2 now in their...
Rafael Barlow has had that for a while from NBA Draft Big Board.
Sure, I think that's big board wise. I just mean this is like
no,
actual
but he's
mock drafts.
He's even had that as far as like people saying like this is like I think he's gonna go to like in some of his reporting in there he's had just like there's a lot out there in the ether that it's like hey like this guy's probably going to, or at least could go to.
Yeah, so let me put it this way. What's more likely of these 4 outcomes based on how 2 and 3 ended up? Charlotte drafts Scoot. Portland drafts Scoot, because that's also a team that has a point guard in place right now. Scoot falls to 4, or someone trades up for Scoot.
Someone trades up for Scoot. You should trade up for Scoot. You should trade up for Scoot to Orlando Magic.
Just casting Markelle Fultz aside like he's garbage. One point guard who has a questionable jumper to a slightly younger one who has a questionable jumper. No,
I would do it.
I hear you. They're in an interesting spot, I feel like, because they just have so much young talent. Do you think a point guard is what Orlando needs? Is that kind of what the final piece would be? I like more of a shooter there. That's why I could go about the similarities to Fultz, because I just want shooting around Paolo and Franz, but you could go too.
You could go either way. Maybe there's like a team that like makes like a more aggressive splash to do something like that to kind of like upset like the hierarchy of what's going on here. But like some team is gonna
Would Houston do it? Would Houston trade up for Scoot, just like one spot maybe if Miller is the guy for Charlotte, and then you just have to go from 4 to 3?
How do you like Jalen Green or James Harden and Scoot?
Okay, well, if the Harden thing happens, then yeah, you're not jumping up to get Scoot Henderson. But
it's going to be very fun.
Like Jalen Green is somewhat interesting. I mean, I think it's the same kind of idea of if Harden was to play with Jalen Green. I think to me, some of that interest probably comes from like, what happens if we get the ball out of that guy's hand a little bit more? Can he make some spot up threes and maybe, playoff ball a little bit more rather than, becoming a 6'6" point guard like he has had to be. But I think I agree with you. I guess the only real, out of those four things I said, the only real difference I could potentially see is if this is finally the summer when Lillard changes teams, then that really just sets Portland up to take Scoot at 3, and just kind of be on their way with the next iteration of their team with him as the centerpiece. And let me tell you, a Scoot Henderson, Shaedon Sharpe backcourt for the future, count me in. They could just be in the dunk contest together next season and put on a pretty awesome show. Like, that would be a cool way to reset your team. So I could see that, but it would have to be, I guess it doesn't even have to be like, you could have Scoot back up Lillard. That's not a terrible thing to do. And Lillard being your sort of mentor there is could do a lot worse than that.
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll see what actually happens or doesn't happen in Portland this summer. Joe Cronin had comments tonight where he said, we'll see what the market will tell, but I think 3 is significant. Obviously, they went from 5 to 3. Cronin continued, there's going to be some really good players available at 3 that could be great for us or someone else, depending on how we approach this draft. So, like, I don't think Lord knows what Portland's going to do. It's a win for them from, like, an asset standpoint to get up to 3, but, like, Lord knows what like they're going to decide to do here. They're the team at the nexus of just like a lot of things could change for them this summer, and I wouldn't be surprised. And also, nothing could change, and I wouldn't be surprised either.
Great to have one of the most well-known and prolific scouts on the media side on your team now. That helps. And Mike Schmitz from ESPN, because I think he was maybe one of the best scouts in the world, and he just happened to be working for ESPN instead of a team, and now Portland has him. So W.
Any other lottery winners, losers for you, Brendon, and how this shook out? Bulls obviously losers because like they just didn't get to keep their pick, but pretty chalk.
Dallas getting their pick, that's nice.
Yeah, who are they trading that for?
DeAndre Ayton. No, he's not worth the top 10 pick. That's probably it. It's kind of hilarious that Washington is at 8 again. I just feel like they've made the 8th overall pick for my entire life.
Sure.
But that's it. No, nothing else big. It was kind of chalk, which is fun in a way that it ended up with all the teams we actually talked about getting the high picks rather than us all just being kind of despondent. That would have been the more chaotic thing. But look, sometimes you tank a whole year. You do deserve the great players, so they suffered. Here they go.
Yeah.
The Spurs are a dominant force once again, and we all just have to deal with that.
Yeah, what I think right now is I think we'll see. I'll call him Vic for you. Vic will go 1.
Mm-hmm.
I think Miller goes 2, and then I think 3, 4, 5 with Portland at 3, Houston at 4, and Detroit at 5. I think that's like a really interesting run of teams because you could convince me of a lot of different things there, and I'm very fascinated to see how all the teams approach. And Houston obviously kind of in the middle of that just because of the whole Harden thing hanging over this. And that this obviously comes before you're supposed to know what's happening with James Harden. So, at least
they'll definitely won't talk to anybody in Harden's camp before the draft. They'll have no idea what's going on.
Tampering is not a thing. Yeah. So, Going to be a weird summer. I'm very sure at this point we're getting a weird NBA summer, and I think the draft might be the kickstart of it. It just feels
teams. When the league's wide open, everybody convinces themselves it's their year, and then you're setting yourself up for failure.
Feeling in the air that we're going to get some stuff. All right, let's move on to Lakers-Nuggets game 1. Nuggets take it. Jokic just had a monster first half. Murray had a monster first half. Lakers come back. Austin Reeves is just absolutely cooking. LeBron misses a layup late, misses a 3 late, has a turnover that Jamal Murray pokes it free to kind of seal this game. Ended up being pretty close. Was not close for much of it, but the Lakers, to their credit, made some adjustments. Putting AD, Brendon. I think this is where I want to start. I think we were texting about this. It was an obvious adjustment, but I think taking AD, who had 40, by the way, had 40 in this game, And it's just like, all right, Jokic had 34, 21, and 14. It's just like, you're 40. Like, whoop-de-doo. The move from Darvin Ham to say, okay, we had AD start guarding Jokic. We just played it straight up. We're going to put Hachimura on Jokic. We're going to understand that Jokic is going to back him down and get near the rim, and we're going to get into the scramble situations. But putting AD there and help, and everyone else doing a really good job of sticking with cutters for the most part, sticking with shooters, that really mucked up the game, I think, in a really positive way for the Lakers. And that, to me, is the template of how that putting AD in help is the template of how I think they're going to play defense the rest of the series.
Yeah, I think it at least has to be
two.
in your tool bag, right? It at least has to be one of the things you can do, because I think that the other part of it is if you have a smaller player, which Davis is more so than like a DeAndre Ayton or a Rudy Gobert or Karl Anthony Towns, the previous matchups that Denver has faced, Davis already is a little more mobile than those guys. But if it's a player like Hachimura, or I thought they might do it with LeBron, to be honest, heading into the series, but Hachimura holding up makes it even better because you don't have to ask LeBron to do that. But what it does is you also can defend the pick and roll, the two-man game with him and Murray, with a little more variety as well. You can kind of hedge at Murray, get the ball out of his hands, or prevent the pull-up three, or prevent him from getting downhill, whatever sort of coverage you want it, whatever you're trying to take away from Murray in that situation, because you also know that the role by Jokic is going to be less open once again, because AD will be at the basket. So it helps when Jokic is posting up. It also helps when they're running the two-man game. But as much as that was an impressive thing, and I actually do want to circle back on the Rui Hachimura side of things overall, we have to stop ignoring the Nikola Jokic games. We haven't had a Nikola Jokic conversation all playoffs, and I feel like every time we get ready to do the podcast, we're like, oh, we should probably
it's true.
Pump him up. And then it's like, oh, ho-hum, he just had one of the best playoff performances that we've ever seen in our lives. And let's talk about all the other stuff. So I'm going to rewind to Nikola Jokic. 34, 21, and 14. I just don't think... Why is Nikola Jokic surpassing our expectations? Is the kind of the way that I want to frame this. And I mean that in two ways. One, why did we have lowered expectations for him? And two, what do you think he's doing maybe that's different or better than he was in the past? So you can take it either direction. But he has just been, I think, better than anyone, even the biggest Nuggets fan ever could have expected. I mean, this is genuinely one of the most dominant postseason runs that I can remember. And it's coming from a guy who we thought was an underperformer this time of year.
So where I would start with this is I think we've seen Jokic absorb more willingly some of the scoring burden throughout this playoffs for him. There's games where he has just decided, I need to be the scorer. I need to be the guy that puts the ball in the basket and attacks. And he's doing that. He did that here. He's still looking for his assists. There's a couple turnovers he had in this game where he's just clearly, he backs down his guy, and is spinning at the last minute, like looking for the cutter and expecting them to just kind of roll in here, and the timing's just a little bit off. But he dictated every minute of this game for them. Like in the 42 minutes he's on the floor, he's dictating the flow of it. Murray got really hot. It's an extension of Jokic. The Lakers' game plan is centered around what Jokic does. Like, even AD has this masterful performance in some ways. It's like a really good AD game. Jokic is just kind of going through it and pushing through it and kind of dominating it. He has, like, he's been the best player in the playoffs.
Yeah.
He just has.
Yep. I think the aggressiveness is exactly where I would have gone. I was going back and watching some of the highlights of the the Lakers Nuggets series from the bubble, and even the box scores. And he just didn't really look to score in that series. And it's not super noticeable, especially because the past two seasons, when you look at his shots per 100 possessions or his usage, a lot of it was really inflated because everybody was hurt and he had to score, but it really wasn't that effective, all things considered. But when you look this year in the playoffs so far, he has a 32% usage rate. In the playoffs, in the bubble, he had a 28.9% usage rate. So it's pretty much 4 percentage points higher, as well as a 17% increase in assist rate. And his efficiency is up, and his free throw rate is up, and his offensive rebounding rate is up, which is a really big one. He's almost more than doubled his offensive rebounding rate from the bubble the last time that this team was healthy. So he's finding these ways to impact the game in the half court offensively as a scorer that he just wasn't before. And that confidence, I think, is really there. We were talking about RJ Barrett and Jaylen Brown and some of the young player development stuff, and how it's a lot of the time just these guys who end up rediscovering and kind of finding their way back to doing what always made them talented in the first place from when they were in high school. In the case of these veteran stars, it's almost like they just find ways to kind of connect parts of their game to one another. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, LeBron needs a post game, and then the post game leads to, he can take some, fadeaway jumpers because the jumpers are there. And then, over time, then, okay, now he has the 3-ball that he didn't used to have. And it starts to just be like, you're limiting your weaknesses. You're having answers for stuff. And it feels like that's kind of what we're seeing from Jokic. Like in that Lakers series in the bubble, he only took 20 shots one time in 5 games. And he shot worse than 50% from the field twice. He really just wasn't that great in that series, all things considered. And in this game, he only took 17 shots, but that's because he made all of them. And he already had a 34-point game, which would have been easily his best game in that series. And this is only game 1. So it's cool to see the evolution of a guy. And it feels like to go to the other direction of why did we have such low expectations? I think that almost the debate about the MVP obviously got super toxic, but I also think it made us think of him as the same player as he has been the past 2 years. It's like, well, he got the MVP because his teammates were hurt and the team was on-off stuff was great and he's a liability on defense, but that doesn't matter in the regular season and all this other stuff, when it's like Jokic is just a better player than he was when he first got his MVP trophy, which was 2 full years ago. Aren't most players better than they were 2 years ago? And it feels like we kind of forgot about that part of it too, is the guy's only still 28, 29. He's still peaking.
The other thing that I think really has buoyed him, Brendon, is the energy he plays with and the pace he's playing with all the time. Jokic isn't fast, but he plays fast. Jokic is I am always amazed, no matter how many times I've watched them, how fast they will get into their first look and then transition to their second look and get into their third look, and it is constantly flowing and flowing and flowing. And even with the Lakers' defensive adjustments that were really smart, it doesn't get them out of the rhythm. It doesn't get Jokic out of his rhythm. He just keeps coming at you, keeps layering in other things. Just even if it's a turnover, it's just like the turnovers are like almost never these really bad turnovers where the ball's like flying everywhere and you just miss. He's always so close. Same thing. He is so close to being precise. LeBron turnovers are just like another teammate made a mistake or the process was flawless and the execution was just like 2% off. But it's never like, what the hell are you doing out there? Bingo. This puts them in such an advantageous place offensively. With Jokic doing the way with Jokic playing the way he's playing, and the energy he plays with and the pace he plays with, it's no offense is immune to adjustments and good defense, but they're as close as you possibly can be, and that gives them such margin for error. And you add in the fact that the way they have built this roster full of role players who fit and want to play how Jokic plays and buy into that, like KCP. Look at what KCP is doing on this team. He's a perfect wing for this team. Look what Bruce Brown is doing. Look at what Jamal Murray is doing. Everything with this team is accentuated and just pushed forward by the way Jokic plays and the way he wants to play. The pace, the ability, the getting into sets quickly, all of that is centered around what Nikola does, and it's beautiful.
They're huge also in terms of the rotation. And the pacing and sort of the processing that he does in the game, it's something to behold. Like he has this way of in the first quarter of these games, he tends to rack up offensive rebounds. And I've never seen a great explanation of why. But it was the same in the Sun series, and it's like he'll get 3 or 4 in the first few minutes of a game, every single game it feels like. But then he didn't. I think he had 6 in the first quarter, or at least the first half, and then none the rest of the game. And that's the same exact thing that happened before. When you allow them to win the rebounding battle and or the transition battle, you're not going to win the game. And that's what's so crazy about this team is their half-court offense is already so good. Their first shot offense, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like they're going to get an amazing shot, but then they also are going to beat you in those other ways, and that's what makes them so dominant, and that's what makes the margin for error against them so tiny. Michael Porter Jr., who I think you mentioned in that supporting cast, the Nuggets are now 76-27 in his career when he scores 15 plus. I looked that up courtesy of StatMuse. That is like the perfect way to show how exhausting this team is to play. All they need to be a 75% win rate machine is for that guy who is a walking bucket to just score 15 points. You know what I mean? Like it was him in the first half, it was KCP in the second half, and the Lakers played a hell of a game, got 66 points from their 2 best players, even had a really nice Reeves game with 23 points, 8 assists, 0 turnovers from their 3rd best player. The Rui game that they had, who we can maybe finish off talking back to him. And it still was just like, yeah, they kind of got it close a few times, but Denver dominated. Like that, it is exhausting to beat this team. The last thing I have on Jokic though is the defense. Mm-hmm. He made a couple plays in this game, and I saw online people starting to kind of pump him up. Oh, not so bad, is he? It's like, yeah, he's still mediocre, or whatever. He's not. We don't have to pretend otherwise. But I keep wondering why, because I've seen a lot of criticism of the Suns not attacking him enough in their second round series. Not even just among Suns fans, but among people who just were watching the series separately. Like, why did they not punish him, try to get him in foul trouble, make him guard, make him tired, any of that stuff? And it feels like, to my answer, and I'll pass it back to you and stop talking in a second, is that they make you have to score so consistently to keep up with them that you're just worried about getting what feels like a good shot. You're not able to be worried about targeting Jokic when you're just like, damn it, we just need a layup. Like, we just need something because they're up 18 and the crowd is going crazy and this is about to get bad. Like, can we just find some way to make a shot? Not, why don't we set a screen and have Jokic do this and all? Like, you can't get to that because they keep you on your heels so much. Does that feel like, that feels very like ethereal and heady, but that's the best that I can come up with. Because I agree, watching these games, it's like, why are they not punishing that guy who's clearly the weakest defender on the court?
I think part of this game too, the flow of it is Murray got in foul trouble and they started really picking on him. I wonder if in a game where Murray isn't like 4 or 5 fouls, and LeBron loves attacking guards as well. That's also, I think, part of this. LeBron loves to get the switch and pound on a guard. Like, that's just part of his DNA. So I do wonder if that's an adjustment they make. I do wonder if they just say, okay, like, we need to wear him out more. I mean, that would be a way to kind of to do it. That would be a way to kind of circle back on this and figure it out in a little bit of a different way. I also the comfort zone is clearly to attack Murray. To me, it seems like the comfort zone for the Lakers is attack Murray, and then you have a shooter, probably Reeves, based on how this game went and based on like what you did. Maybe D'Lo has a game where he gets hot or whatever. He probably will. He tends to have like 2 games or so in a series, it seems like, where he gets really hot. That kind of just flares out and is there for the shot. That seemed to be like their comfort zone of how they wanted to attack Denver in crunch time and not attack Jokic. But I wonder if that's a game 2 adjustment.
Do you think they start Rui in game 2 over Schroeder? Because I don't think the Schroeder thing really worked. I don't think he can really guard Murray, and then if he's not out there for that, it's like, well, he probably shouldn't be in the starting lineup.
Well, so the thing that I texted you pretty immediately in this game, it would lead me to think they should start Rui, and it's just, I don't think, unless they want to just play Vando on Murray, the Lakers do not have a good option to defend Murray. Schroeder's too small. D'Lo's just not a good enough defender. Reeves isn't quick enough. And Murray's it can be a little hot and cold. He can be a little inconsistent. So maybe just have some games where he just misses open shots, and that'll happen. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think Murray's worth adjusting your whole defensive scheme around. I've said that for a while in these playoffs. I just think everything should be about Jokic and winning the possession game. And if you can do that, you're going to have a chance, even if Murray has a good night.
Right. So I think the template of how I thought the DHO stuff and a lot of the cuts got really kind of mucked up by AD and help. Just the specter of AD in help, and Denver chose not to or doesn't want to or whatever. They don't put Aaron Gordon in as a screener to pull AD out. And that to me would be something, if I'm them, I'm looking to maybe do in game 2. Just one here and there. Just Jokic handle the ball. Maybe it's Gordon sets the screen. Maybe he sets a screen for Murray's guy. Just something with Aaron Gordon, I think, to kind of try to maybe pull AD out of those spots and out of help as the center of the Lakers kind of scramble ball defense at the back end. That to me would be like a thing you just do a couple times. You don't do it a ton. I don't think it's something that they're going to get a lot of effective looks out of time and time again if they keep hammering it. But a couple times to get Anthony Davis thinking a little bit, I think would be a smart way to go for game 2.
Yeah, I think if you do start Rui, if you don't start Vanderbilt, because that would be the kind of obvious thing if you're just trying to come up with a solution against Jamal Murray. If you do start Rui, or if you keep the same starting lineup in game 2, I would try Reeves on Murray just to see. I mean, he got cooked a little bit in the third and fourth quarters also, but again, I'm not super concerned about Jamal Murray because I think even his best shots, unless he's getting layups, which you should at least be able to prevent easy layups if you're a good defense. And again, with Davis in help, then even his best shots are, kind of dribble threes or fall away stuff or post ups. Like, he doesn't make it easy on himself in a lot of ways. So that's part of why I don't worry about it. But yeah, this series is going to be interesting from the chess move standpoint. Obviously, you favor the Nuggets because they just won a game and they have home court and they were the better team all regular season. But it just feels like they're going to be the team that forces the adjustments more so than the Lakers are. Because the Lakers got a pretty ideal game out of their two best guys. I know I've said that a couple times, but like you don't want to waste those games, and the Lakers kind of did here. So if you're not getting that again, then it leads even more in the Nuggets' favor, and they didn't get like the absolute best performance from everybody that they could have, Yeah.
All right, Brendon, let's wrap up with coaching carousel news. A lot of movement here right now, with some coaches getting fired. Doc Rivers being let go, Monty Williams being let go. It seems like we're going to get some openings filled in the coming days. The Pistons one was something that kind of linked to the Diddlater. Kevin Ollie seems to be the favorite for that job, which is kind of interesting, which could leave Charles Lee open for the Milwaukee Bucks job, considering he's on that staff and is well thought of and all of that. You had a note in here that I'm going to let you start off with. Every finals coach you pointed out since 2019 is fired except for Steve Kerr and Eric Spoelstra. And your thing is that bad? And this is where I go with this.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I'm going first.
All good.
I understand why coaches are the fall guy. I understand how this happens. But I don't always think coaching is like a new coaching hire or changing your voice, so to speak, is like really like a constructive way just to fix everything. You then have to adjust to that new coach and install new offense and new schemes and principles and all of that stuff. Okay. You can't fire the players, so I get it. Like, you can't be like, all right, like Pat Connaughton, thank you for your service. Here's your pink slip. Like, go home. You have to deal with the cap and the guys being on your books. Coaches are going to be the fall guys. But, like, I don't think, like, necessarily changing Doc Rivers out in Philly or Monty Williams out in Phoenix is, like, a guaranteed way to change anything. I get why you do it. But I don't think these hires and this era we're in where it's just, like, rotating chairs at some of these big jobs, it seems like, kind of like European soccer style, where it's, like, guys coach at a certain level and they just kind of rotate through these jobs. And if they don't win, they get fired. to me, that just I don't really always understand what this is trying to solve, or like what these teams necessarily are doing by just changing the coach because they can, or like that's you have to make a change, so that's the one you do.
It's complicated. I mean, there's been a lot of, honestly, to me, pretty exhausting debate about a lot of this online this week, of like a bunch of people who have worked in organizations or covered the league telling a bunch of fans that they don't know anything about coaching, and then that there's so much more beneath the surface than you really see. And like I'm obviously not naive enough to think that we all see the day-to-day of coaching, but if the reason I brought this up is, as much as there's a lot of that, and I know fans, you and I have covered teams locally for long enough to know that the number one thing that happens after a bad loss is that every coach should get fired the immediate day after, no matter what. And like that is an exaggeration and overreaction.
Mm-hmm.
But it feels like the GMs are a little bit quicker trigger than like most media would be. So I end up in this position where I'm like, are we all too hard on coaches and we don't know how hard they work and all the things that they put in behind the scenes to lead to these outcomes, and we just see the 5% and judge them on that unfairly? Or the people who do see everything they do behind the scenes are firing them quicker than most of us would? So I guess it's just sort of this weird conundrum where it feels like a lot of what's getting talked about is like this day and age. You hear Doc Rivers and Monty Williams and some of the people who have gotten fired, when they're talking after the losses about the potential to get fired, they go on some of these diatribes about, nobody's job is safe these days and it's all just a bunch of pressure and the media but it's like, well, no, your bosses are firing you, not us. So it's funny to me. And I don't also know, is it more than it used to be? Is that true? Or do we just say that?
It feels like it to me. Like, Monty Williams just made the finals with Phoenix. Like, just made the finals.
Do you think Monty Williams should have been fired? As somebody who's not as, obsessive about it as me.
I get it, but I feel like maybe not. Like, what was supposed to happen when you depleted the roster and you traded for KD in the middle of the season and he got hurt, so he was limited games, so you had like a lack of a chance to do, like,
I think it was less about this year and more about the despite Durant arriving, some of the very familiar ways in which they were not ready to do this stuff. I mean, look no further than exactly what we were just talking about with Rui Hachimura. And I know you've been hearing about this over text long enough, so I won't belabor it. But like, the Suns had TJ Warren and Torrey Craig and whoever you want to, Ish Wainwright, who NBA fans might not even know is a player on the Suns, to go ahead and be the Rui in that case, or the PJ Tucker, or the OG Anunoby, or the Draymond Green, to defend Jokic in the post and then send helpers his way. And they just didn't do that. They didn't use Durant in a lot of the ways that his other teams have. And that was very similar to the lack of imagination and preparation, or I don't want to say preparation like the guy didn't put work in, but that type of thing. One that I think is...
Well, can I just run into this? That is, I think, the power of when you watch a team every day.
Yeah.
Like that is just the reality. Like, I feel like I watched the Suns decent amount. I had a good grasp on them as much as you can. But like, when you watch the team every day, see them in person, you do understand things and see some of that stuff differently, and read all the coverage and do your own coverage and stuff. Secondly, I think the best example of this, as far as all of this coaching stuff, is not even one from this cycle. It's the fact that Frank Vogel got fired by the Lakers.
That's exactly where I was going to go. So you think that was unfair?
Yes, because they won a freaking title during the pandemic, and it's like you have one bet, and it's just like, bye? Like, what? Like, what are we doing? What are we doing here?
That's a perfect example of the roster being the obvious problem that everybody in the right mind.
You traded for no one. You could have had Tyler. You could have had Red Auerbach, like, brought back in his prime, like, whatever. Phil Jackson in his prime, Pat, like, whomever. Spo, like, they weren't solving that Russell Westbrook problem. That was a Rob Pelinka thing.
Could have.
Yeah, but apparently. Maybe not with the Lakers. Maybe only with Paul and, like, you know what I mean. Like, it's all contextual, but it's like, what was Frank Vogel supposed to do with this thing that this problem Rob Pelinka and LeBron and AD created for him.
Absolutely. And to follow up on what you were saying to compare it to European soccer, I mean, that's one of the things that I feel like is the biggest kind of culture shock from becoming a fan of that sport compared to others, is just like, it's absolute chaos. I don't know why anyone, aside from the money, obviously, why anyone would ever want to coach in that sport. It's just like you shouldn't even rent an apartment. You shouldn't even sign a lease, let alone buy a home wherever you're coaching, because it's just a nightmare.
Well, the club you are a fan of, Chelsea, is the perfect example of this, because they had Thomas Tuchel, who's widely considered one of the best managers in the world. Yeah. Fire him. Okay. You want Graham Potter. There's all this reporting about Todd Bowley, our American weirdo, who's like talking to Cucurella in the transfer market about Potter's tactics, all this stuff, right? There's all this reporting about this. And then Potter's gone like 6 months later, and I consume like the BBC soccer show. I listen to other shows, and it's like no one was like, yeah, Potter probably deserves like a longer leash. It's just like expected that at that level of the club, you do that, and it's like,
yep.
My soccer father, Mauricio Pochettino, is taking the Chelsea job. And it's like, I understand from like an ego perspective and wanting to work perspective why he's going to take that job. But it's like, I look at that job and I'm like, why would you take this? Yeah. It's like, there are Brendon, there are jobs on the NBA market right now like that, like I would be very hesitant. Like, honestly, like, I can't believe Ime Udoka to some degree took the Houston job. Like, why? Like what?
The two best coaches on the market taking two of the worst jobs on the market and doing it early before they even knew what might be available to them.
Are you referring to Quinn Snyder? Are you referring to Quinn Snyder in Atlanta then? Okay. Same exact thought, because it's like, I don't understand why, like it seems like he got say in the organization. Brad Rowland, I know you're listening, text us and tell us if we're wrong about this. I know he got power in the organization, and I know he got a lot of money. Okay. Yeah. I understand that. And I understand these guys are absolute sickos who like want to coach and want to work and like can't stay away. I get that. I fully understand all of that. But like Udoka like made the finals with the Celtics. You're telling me that like if he couldn't have waited and like if he misses the Rockets job, it's like whoop-de-doo. Maybe the Clippers job is open in a couple weeks with someone like what happens with Ty. Maybe the Suns job was going to open up if you wanted to coach KD and Devin Booker. Like, I don't know. That seems like more appealing to me than working for Tillman Fertitta and trying to figure out whatever the F is going on with the Rockets. Yeah.
I would say with Udoka, the elephant in the room of whatever happened with the employee is maybe he felt as if that was... You can explain both, right? With Udoka, it's like maybe he thought that was the only team that would hire him. I don't know if he's right or wrong, but
it certainly seemed like a lot of teams, like including the Atlanta Hawks and including the Toronto Raptors, really didn't seem to care too much about the Udoka stuff, which I'm not saying is good. I'm just saying it seemed like
ball very clearly, right? Because the league has been doing cleanup for the Rockets, saying we cooperated with, we helped them, and Udoka cooperated, and everything's all good. Don't ask any questions. It's all fine.
Utter farce. They handled it ridiculously. That whole thing is a sham, and like we're never like it's ridiculous.
And then with Quinn Snyder, like you said, it seems there's been some offhand mentions by insider types that he had some level of control more than he might have been able to get elsewhere. No idea if Quinn Snyder's good at talent evaluation, so congratulations to the Hawks. We'll see if that actually goes well, but I can see from the coach's standpoint why you would want that. The thing I was going to say about the chaos of European soccer, and if this actually is more, which again, I hope somebody somewhere actually does the number crunching. It seems like a great insider article or ESPN Plus article for Kevin Pelton or something, because I would like to hear if it's more. But what happens, the byproduct, the ripple effect, the whatever of that is, it's just turmoil. It's just change a lot. I think that is one thing behind the scenes that maybe does get underrated, is like the practice schedule, the media relations, the community events, the season ticket holder stuff, the whatever. All these things are set schedule-wise and tone-wise by the person who is the head coach. And if anybody has ever rooted for or followed or covered an awful team that changed its coach a lot of times, it does feel a little like whiplash. It's just like, what is this team, And so I think that is one way in which it does matter, and why cycling through different people in that position is not always good. The last kind of data point that I was going to bring up here, though, Chris, is because we talked about this with the Bucks thing, right? Of this idea of like, do you have to go with the guy that's proven, or do you try to look for more creativity and new ideas and fresh thoughts with an assistant that might not have gotten that chance to be proven yet, and you give them that shot? I made the case for the second thing because I'm always just going to lean that way. I think a lot of the time, at least the coaches that have won championships recently, just frankly to me, aren't that impressive. Maybe that's part of it, just the moment we're in right now. If it's Steve Kerr, of course, but some of the other guys, not so much. But Ime Udoka last year and now Darvin Ham this year have just blown expectations out of the water. Like they've nailed their first shot at this and been able to command the respect of the locker room in their first go round, been able to schematically be a little bit more inventive. Something, everything from getting Anthony Davis to just deal with playing the 5 all season to what we just saw in this game 1 with some of the adjustments, starting Schroeder, doing the stuff against Jokic, putting the ball in different guys' hands, whatever the case was. They've done that. Does that not change anything? And then we're still hearing the national talking heads sort of do the whole, well, if you're going to have somebody coach Giannis, they really should. If you're going to have somebody coach Kevin Durant, you really have to have them be able to walk into a room and blah, blah, blah. It's like, it feels like they're just completely making shit up to me. It's like these guys are doing a good job and you're just ignoring it.
Well, it's like Darvin Ham is I'm sure able to have these conversations. You go back to 2016, Ty Lue gets that job. He's able to call out LeBron James, and it has set the template for everything that has come. Look at Eric Spoelstra is the best coach in the NBA. And when he started, it was LeBron's talking to Pat, trying to get Pat to come down and coach the team, and Pat stood by him, and he figured it out.
Was these guys real? Was Pat Riley ever actually going to coach that team? I feel like that's just an embellishment, to be honest.
But you know what? I love some myth making.
I mean, it's commonly held assumption. I'm not even saying you're.
I said it like it was. I said it was like it was carved in a stone somewhere, like on top of Mount NBA. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like Mount Spalding up there, and it's just like we're carved into the stone. But I think you're right. I think it is also about you have to. It's hard for us. And I think anyone in the media, frankly, but I think we'll acknowledge it as half the battle. It's hard. You have to do your vetting and do it really well and look outside your comfort zone a little bit. Like Darvin Ham was someone I knew Lakers was familiar with. I'm sure but it's like you went outside of your staff, you went outside of your building. Udoka was a pull for the Celtics when he really turned things around for them. Mazzulla, look at his background. It comes from a very kind of unique background, and it's been a very rapid ascent for him into being the head coach of a team that could win the title this year. There's obviously some kind of retreads mixed in there. Mike Malone was the coach with the Kings before this. This is his deepest run. Mike Brown, was with the Kings. But I think it's being willing to look for guys who probably do strike that balance of, hey, they can talk to this guy and have the authority, because you do need that authority, I think. The best coaches all have it to some degree. And also they bring new ideas, and they're going to push you forward in a schematic way.
I would always be looking for a Mike Brown or Kenny Atkinson type who was a head coach and then kind of intentionally went out of their way to learn some lessons and dip back into the assistant thing, or a first-time head coach. But the guy who just got fired because his last team wasn't thrilled with him, why are we in such a hurry to prop those guys up? That's what's crazy. Yeah. It's like they just got fired. If you just got fired, your buddies wouldn't be like, "Oh, you should hire my friend." They'd be like, "Bro, are you okay? Why'd you get fired? Do some work on yourself, figure some things out." And then with coaches, it's like, what a travesty. Get this guy back in the league immediately.
I think these things sometimes feel very safe, and teams want to with a coaching hire. I think sometimes they want to hit a single that maybe could get stretched out into a double, and they don't want to swing for the home run. They want to just control something that can go very poorly. Look, there will be a coaching hire in the cycle at a how profound that someone will mess up badly. It will happen. This is how this works. Every cycle there is one just disaster head coaching hire. It just is the nature of it. The Cavs of the team I cover. Is it going to
be the Sixers hiring Mike D'Antoni?
Yeah, because what the fuck is going on? What the fuck? What the fuck? Like, I read that, and I love Mike D'Antoni. He's a legend. But that guy was like, what if I'd never played a center with the Houston Rockets? And then it's like,
He's also,
hey,
I mean, not to be ageist, but isn't the dude like into his 70s at this
yeah,
point?
but like, why the fuck would you hire the coach? Unless it's just a Daryl Morey thing, which then like, okay, like Daryl, are you losing your fastball a little bit here, brother? But like, why are you hiring the coach who doesn't want to coach who didn't want to play centers and space everything out and play this hardened ball? Why are you fucking hiring that guy to coach Joel Embiid?
Who didn't touch the ball in the last 4 minutes of Game 6
Like,
when you needed a win?
What are we doing? What are we doing?
Let's hire
like,
the guy who's gonna put the ball back into Harden's hands. Yeah, I don't know.
like hire Johnny
72.
Bryant.
He's 72.
Hire Johnny Bryant. Do that. Okay, hire someone from the Miami Heat staff that you like. Hire Jordy Fernandez from the Kings. Do that.
Sam Cassell, who's on
Hire
your staff
Sam-
already.
Yeah, hire Sam Cassell, who like very much seems like he should be an NBA head coach. And like, I know the former player thing go wrong. Like Chauncey Billups was like, not a good head coach, but
Still has a job.
still the job. Jason Kidd, not sure is a good head coach. Like this can go wrong.
Cut the not sure. Yeah, Jason Kidd, not a good head coach.
Like this can go wrong, but like I would that model like Ty Lue's a former player who turned into a really great head coach. And Sam Cassell has he didn't jump to being a head coach right away. He has done the thing where it's like he was an assistant and learned and is grinding his way through that way. And very much seems like a guy who has the respect and the rapport. Billups was like interviewing for president of basketball operations jobs before he ended up being a head coach.
Billups was
Kobe Altman has a job because Chauncey Billups decided he didn't want to like leave Denver to come work for Dan Gilbert.
whoever these guys who come immediately out of the player ranks and become candidates for this stuff, like their agents deserve just nice little bonuses.
Lots of
for
money,
Christmas,
yeah.
because it's like they haven't done anything and they're like hot commodities. Like
well, it's like you
Jason
meet,
Kidd. I was going back through with the Ty Lue stuff where he's obviously a desirable candidate and might leave the Clippers. He would have to be traded for because he's still on contract there.
The team. He seems like he's like the health. I wonder if he takes like a year off.
He could, but with Jason Kidd, another guy who jumped right into this whole mess and was a desirable guy right out of just having been a player. He got traded from the Nets, where he wasn't even that great of a coach, to the Bucks for a first-round pick. I guess it just speaks to no one knows what they're doing here. Is your top person on the market in this coaching carousel still Atkinson? I know you're a big hire Kenny Atkinson guy.
It's probably in some order Atkinson, Vogel, and Cassell.
Okay.
That's probably where I would go. Then Johnny Bryant would be in there. Jordy Fernandez would be in there.
Vogel offensively scares me a little bit. That's like the Suns obviously have this opening, so I've been thinking, and
he would not be if we were gonna do like matchmaker, he would not be the one I'm like matching for the Suns.
Yeah.
I also like the other name on this list that I think should be rated very highly, and probably will, if he wants to get a job, will get one. But I also don't know what to make of him based on how Toronto ended. Is Nick Nurse?
Yeah, I don't know if people like him.
That's the thing. Like it's
a
red flag.
I don't know.
So
I'm not
so here,
I'm well sourced on Toronto.
No, so but it's a red flag to me when one of your former assistants, Nate Bjorkgren, gets the Pacers job. He gets fired for like being a prick, basically. Mm-hmm. T.J. Warren is just like, this guy sucks, and then you immediately bring him back to your staff
and hire him for Team Canada. He's on his Team Canada staff. Like they're boys. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I'm not saying like you can't be prickly at times. Like I think sometimes being prickly is like part of life, and like asserting yourself is like part of it. But being an asshole is like a step beyond that. And it seemed like Nate Bjorkgren was just an asshole when he was head coach of the Indiana Pacers.
Yeah, it's weird. And all of this stuff is like why I always lean toward, let's give someone new a shot. You know, like I've thrown out Dan Craig as a Suns guy because I don't know if you know that name. Not James Bond. Rest in peace. But
Spoilers.
Rest in peace to a fictional character who will definitely be reborn in like 3 years when they make the next movie.
Yes.
But he was on the Heat staff forever, and now he's been Ty Lue's associate head coach for the past 3 years. Give me that guy. He had G League head coaching experience where he was like the coach of the year in the G League, was under Spo forever. He also was a former video coordinator in Miami. Then he was under Spo. Then he kind of took the step to be like, okay, let me get out of Miami, try to get the more experience here, be an associate head coach versus just an assistant. Like those guys are the ones who should be getting jobs, not, Doc Rivers for the 9th time.
Yeah.
Or Mike D'Antoni for the 450th or whatever it is for him.
I would like Doc Rivers to like maybe just like get a podcast or something where he can like explain to me like
not really the voice
stuff.
for podcasting, if I'm being honest.
Okay, well, there's also we should
impression.
No, I do not. I'm not trying to get myself canceled, Brent. Thank you, Brendon.
I more mean the rasp, not the other part.
No, but like the rasp also would probably get me canceled because I think it would just be bad. Can I do you have a son? Would Craig be the one you'd favor for the Suns right now?
Ty Lue would be the guy I want for the Suns.
Okay, yeah, same. I would also just like want to hire Ty Lue.
I think he's one of the best coaches in basketball. So
he would be number 2 to me, I think.
After Kerr? Spo?
No, after Spo. I go Spo, Ty, Kerr would be like my 3.
Yeah.
And Carlisle 4 probably.
Mm.
He's just that guy like just knows what he's doing forever,
Yeah.
I know kind of cantankerous but like wildly successful for a long time. Brendon, I think the last thing I want to say about this before we wrap up is I do think these playoffs have shown us, like, at least me, and maybe this is just by virtue of the team I covered and watched them just get their coaching get shit on. Good coaching is such an advantage when you have it. And it allows you to really kind of like stay in series and maybe you could be on the verge of losing or being in a weird spot with. Like, I think what Darvin Ham is doing is a big deal. I think part of the reason the Heat beat the Knicks is because Spo just coached circles around Tom Thibodeau for most of that series. Like, I think Monty got outcoached probably by Michael Malone to some degree, right? Like, I think these series have in some ways really been defined by these coaching advantages or disadvantages, and those margins are getting thinner now that we're here. But like, Mazzulla was doing some wild stuff with Boston, and like he's had to kind of learn on the fly and stuff. Like all of these things are very in flux in front of us right now, and I think we're seeing coaching kind of like laid out in front of us in very real time with some of these things right now.
So it matters a lot, but no one knows how to figure it out. Imagine being a GM.
Yeah.
Sounds like a great job. Hey, fine. This will really matter, but you'll probably fuck it up. Congratulations. Here's your $10 million salary. That's what you're paid for.
Yeah,
That's what the money's for.
Well, and that's what the money's for. But it's like I'm just like, and like on a recent soccer note, I've been reading a lot about like Carlo Ancelotti lately. And it's just like that guy was just like, he's the opposite of kind of what we've talked about. It's like that guy's just been like around for a while. And it's like he went from Everton back to Real Madrid, and he's just like wins Champions League only now with Real Madrid, and like might go coach the Brazilian national team. That guy just like wins, and he knows what he's doing. And it's just like there's just like a certain level of quality that like certain guys can bring out of you, and some of them also evolve with the times. And I think like whether it's a young guy who's new or whether it's like someone who's more established, I think this is about identifying someone who's both going to evolve and maximize what you are right now. I think those are like it's kind of impossible to know because things will just mess up. And like, but like I think you're right to say like you look at Monty Williams, it's like why should Philly be in a rush to hire Monty Williams? He's a good coach. Like I think he'd be a better. I think he's a better coach than like coaches that are employed by teams right now. But if you're a title contending team with an opening right now, is he like the right fit for this stage of what you're doing? The answer feels like no.
Yeah, I think Monty would be great for. I mean, he doesn't have to coach. I think he has like 3 years left on and like $8 million annually. So he's chilling if he doesn't want to coach. But if Detroit or something would be a nice spot.
If I was like a coach that got fired like that, I would pull the Cliff Kingsbury and just like immediately go to Thailand and stop taking phone calls from reporters asking me to comment. I'd just be gone for months.
But these people are crazy. That's the other part. They can't.
Yeah, they're
settle
sickos.
down.
They're utter sickos.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, let's end there. This has been the Just Basketball Show for Wednesday, May 17th. Some stuff we didn't get to. Didn't get to talk about the Sixers really in the offseason. We'll have some Suns offseason stuff. We're going to do WNBA preview on Thursday. So I think on that show, as a note, we will cover some of the Becky Hammon Aces investigation fallout. We have a special guest lined up for that. That's Sabrina Merchant from The Athletic, one of the GOATs, the first guest on our podcast who has also appeared on Jeopardy, which is a cool fun fact for me personally as a big Jeopardy fan. But until next time, I'm Chris. That is Brendon. Thanks again to Jake Stevenson, Dillon Heiser for producing. Subscribe, rate, review in your podcast platform of choice. Subscribe on YouTube. Hit the notification bell. Be well, everyone. Enjoy the hoops. They're all good. It's all fun.